live on YouTube.
Hello, YouTube. Right then, I will let everybody in now, Kate, and I will introduce you, and then we'll get going.
Okay.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the latest Nexus Education podcast, webinar, YouTube live stream, whatever you want to call it. My name's Damien. I'm from Nexus Education. I'm going to hand over to Kate very shortly. I just want to say that we've got lots of great free content on the website, so please do check it out. The website is www.nexus-education.com. On there, we've got loads of free resources, CPD, everything for schools is free. And if your school group fancies accessing £1,000 in funding as well, do check out the next working there on the website. So without further ado, Kate, I'm going to hand over to you to talk to your panel of edu-experts about playful learning. Have fun.
Thanks. Thank you, Damien. Hi, everybody. You know me. I was here the other week. My name's Cate Knight. I'm a secondary trained educator, but I've got experience across all age ranges. I've worked in the UK and abroad. I'm joined this evening by the beautiful Ruth Swales, who is going to wave at you.
Hello.
By the lovely Cate Knight, who is my sister-in-law. She's waving at you too. And the absolutely amazing Claire Nevai, like Hawaii.
Hawaii, imagine Hawaii.
Nevai, like Hawaii. So ladies, the reason I kind of invited you guys on is because I really wanted to talk about Helen and I the other week talked about the burst of creativity that we've seen in some people's home learning, whether that was set by schools or whether that was something that parents have created or whether kids have done that of their own volition. I've just been really impressed by the imagination that's come out of all of this. And I think what I wanted to talk to you about was the importance of that in the development of education. And I know that all of you have your own sort of specialisms in that. So really, I suppose we were talking earlier, weren't we, about the idea that this has seen a relaxing of the regimented systems that the UK education system has worked to. And I think it was you, Ruth, that was just saying, do we feel that we're able to let go and let kids be creative? Yeah. So what, because we were talking, weren't we, about how some schools have tried to maintain that level of control and others have been far more free.
Yeah, I think it's been really interesting watching as a parent and an educator to see what's happened. And, you know, earlier on we were talking about the fact that it can be quite scary. And often people don't want to let go because that's a bit scary. You're not quite sure if you allow too much creativity, how the children are going to respond to that and where they're going to take it. And so I think some schools have tried to maintain school life at home, and I'm not sure that's even possible, but I'm certainly not sure it's desirable, and I think it can be quite limiting. And I understand why people have done that, and I know some people are finding that very helpful, so I don't want to be critical of that, but I do think there's space for people to be creative, for people to think about things in a different way and maybe look for different ways to learn it and start to really appreciate that learning doesn't just happen in a classroom at a desk. There are so many different ways to learn, and that's something that we explore. I mean, my passion is very much early years, and that's just a fundamental part of our curriculum in early years, so it sits really well with me.
Yeah, I mean, what I was going to say is I'm going to give a few examples of some of the wonderful sort of creative learning that I've seen. I had a conversation with a neighbour over the fence, and she said, I feel really guilty. I'm only actually sort of managing a couple of hours of school in a day. And I went, well, what are you doing the rest of the time? And she said, we're singing, we're making things out of cardboard boxes, we're baking, you know, we played shop for a while. And I went, so you've been doing creative art, literacy, numeracy, weights and measures, you know, DT, you've been schooling, but you've just been doing it in an immensely hands-on, playful way. And she was like, oh, does that count then? And I just felt like going, yeah, you're doing it brilliantly. You know, yeah. It's brilliant. So it's, I suppose it's reassuring in some ways that parents are doing things like that.
Yeah, I think as well, you know, sometimes we have to have that reassurance as teachers, you know, that a lot of the time there is a little bit of a feeling of, oh, you know, we did this and it was wonderful, but I haven't got a piece of evidence for it except what the children did. And I think we need to get out of that mindset. And I know I certainly fell into it sometimes. You look in the children's books and you think, well, there's nothing there today, but I know they've learned a lot. And I think it's just making sure that everybody understands that every single thing that you do with children, they will be learning.
Yes.
Yeah, so I was just going to say that, and I think something that early years practitioners understand, and it's part of our practice, is that you recognise and value that when children arrive at nursery or school, that they're coming with something. They're not just empty, they have their own experiences. And I think it's just so important that we connect with those, don't we? We learn about the family, we get to know the family, we include the families in the child's learning. And I think, you know, from what I've seen from my communication with the families at my nursery school, is that they are doing so many lovely things at home. And it's been a real shift in how we communicate with people at the moment. But they're emailing pictures and updates of things that the children are doing at home, and it's lovely. And we're kind of managing to share this a little bit on Twitter and through YouTube now. But families are doing these things. They have done for the first 3 years of the children's lives. They're doing as much as they can, and I think we have to kind of recognise that and acknowledge it, don't we?
It would be nice to see it. I mean, I don't know whether this is just me, but it would be nice to see almost. I know people have jobs and I know that they're important, but I feel like some parents continue with that once their kids get to school, and others kind of almost do a handover. They kind of go, well, we've done our bit and now it's over to school. But I think the content, you know, we always say, don't we, consistency with kids. And I don't think that means always the same, but I think it does sometimes mean that if you started something, that kids kind of need that. They need to be able to see that journey through, don't they? But Katie, you were talking earlier about not necessarily, Ruth was saying about having to have written evidence for everything. And you were talking earlier about sort of the IB practice for that.
Yeah, really sort of the IB and sort of the Reggio Emilia approach, that sort of role of the role of documentation in assessing that sort of inquiry-based learning, and also the shift in the role of the teacher, in that, you know, it's very much a case of playing along with children and being there and observing, and then giving those little nudges as the learning happens in the moment. We were talking earlier, Ruth, it's quite a skill. It's not easy, and I think that's one of the reasons that play sometimes, you know, we do a lot of play in early years, but as we go up through the school, it tends to die off a little bit, and whether that's sort of because of, you know, the difficulty of it, of doing it, but also I think the content coverage and the system that sort of evolves into something that doesn't really allow for it to happen.
Agreed. I think it kind of gets siphoned in a certain direction by pressure from top down, is my feeling with it. That actually you guys are the bottom end of that pyramid, in that it starts with you, and what would be lovely is to see it feed upwards, you know, to see the foundation actually feed up through the chain, so that the journey wasn't capped, you know, so there wasn't this final endpoint in education, that actually it just continued as a long learning journey. But unfortunately the system we have here sort of caps the learning at 18 and then pushes the expectation downwards.
I was going to say the system is kind of built from the top downwards, isn't it, rather than building it from the bottom up, where children, starting where children are, it's built the other way down.
Yeah. What's the end goal and how do we get there?
Yeah, and that doesn't necessarily fit with what we know about child development, does it? No.
I was going to say, I think it's tricky. You know, we were talking about that earlier. It's very difficult to do, and it's a skill, but it is achievable. And what I always go back to when I'm talking to people about the how is that if you look at the national curriculum, it doesn't actually tell you how to teach. It tells you what you need to cover. but it doesn't tell you how you have to do that. So there are ways of introducing playfulness beyond EYFS, but I think it's about giving people the skill to find those, what I would call teachable moments, what you were talking about there, where you're playing alongside and there's just you mentioned a nudge, Katie, and I would say that's a teachable moment when you just spot something and think, actually, if I just make a comment now or ask a question, now, or even just introduce a resource at this point as a provocation, that will raise the whole interaction and take all that learning to the next level. And it's a skilled practitioner who can do that all the time.
Yeah, I think I'm talking from a secondary perspective here. This is quite lovely for me to hear this, but it's interesting because I know exactly what I would say to you from a secondary perspective, which is that the onus of culpability at my level would mean that I desperately want to do that, and I desperately want to put faith in the inquiry process because I know it works. Having taught that way at a lower level in schools, I know that, I understand that it works. My worry would be that the amount of content that I have at a GCSE or even in a Key Stage 3 session, because now they're sort of rolling out GCSE prep in year 8 and year 9, that actually the pressure that is there from all your progress 8 targets and everything like that really squashes your creativity in teaching. And I mean, I'm talking from a creative arts subject perspective, so I had way more leeway than, for instance, English, maths or science, and I think that's a real shame, because I agree with you. I think that actually to allow kids to have their own journey, that you just sort of steer a little bit for them, is really beautiful. So here's the question then: how do we take that back into schools? What do you think teachers need to do?
I think what Claire was just talking about before, about how the interactions that you're having with parents and the way that you're communicating with parents, how that's changed, and that's really positive. My question will be, can we build on that to keep that going, so that just becomes part of our everyday practice? This is what we do, you know, and that to me is real parent partnership.
Yeah, I love it when, you know, sometimes you might start off a relationship with the family where it is a case of they drop the children and they go, but it's kind of getting them involved in their children's learning. And once you find whatever that magic ingredient is, that to get parents involved, that relationship is so much strong between you, the child, and the family, and getting them involved in the children's learning, and respecting what they're doing at home. And I think, like you're saying, what's been happening at home for the past 5-6 weeks, and building on that, because they're doing it and it's giving them the confidence to know that you're doing a great job. But that's what I do, spend a lot, you know, my weekly, you know, when I touch base with families, it's saying, you're doing a great job, do not worry, you're doing a great job, there's no pressure. And we send ideas, but it's valuing their contributions, isn't it?
Very much so. I think the interesting thing, again, and this is me comparing the international schools that I've worked in with the British schools I've worked in. In the British schools, I mean, I've worked in a 2-tier and a 3-tier system, and in the 3-tier system, it's less evident, weirdly. Middle schools still manage to keep that close connection between home and school. And when I say close, I'm not criticising the lack of communication at high school at all. There's still huge amounts of communication, and it's wonderfully professional. But that level of teamwork, I suppose, is the way I would put it. And it almost, I suppose, I don't know whether it's to do with the autonomy of the child as they grow up, or whether it's to do with the workload of the teacher. But in the UK, I found that, you know, there's less time spent on building that relationship with parents. And working internationally, I suppose smaller communities in some ways and closer communities, but I spent a huge amount of my time, like you said, Claire, building relationships, talking to parents, reassuring them, making sure that they were involved in their kids' learning. And I haven't really spent that much time on that in the UK.
Yeah, I just to pick up on what you were saying, Claire, about, you know, the relationships and that communication between parents. It really is that idea of making learning visible, and that partnership, parents as partners. Making learning visible can sometimes be quite tricky when you are in school and the parents are at home and you're all in your separate kind of boxes. But the situation at the moment has thrown us into this this place where we have to all work together. And I'm hoping, really hoping, that some of that that sharing of what's happening at home, and then when we eventually go back into schools, the sharing of what happens at school becomes this kind of three-way place.
Yeah.
And things like the platforms that people are using used to be very much a one-way. It will tell you what's happening, and then you can see your child's learning story. Now the parents and the children have ownership of that.
Yes.
And it's becoming that they're, you know, the stakeholders are having their say, and it's becoming a much more powerful tool.
It's more child-centered, and I think that's something, Ruth, I remember you saying once at Brew Ed Wakey that you were very much like, we need to be focusing on the child. You know, they are the people at the center of this. They are the ones that are ultimately, they learn when they learn, and they learn how they learn, and we can do whatever we like, really, but you know, the learner has to be at the very center of all we do.
Absolutely. I mean, if it wasn't for the children, we wouldn't be here, would we? None of us. So I think, and you know, I completely understand why this happens. School life, nursery life is very, very busy. There's a lot that happens externally. There are lots of external pressures. So you might have somebody coming in to inspect you, or you might have somebody coming in to advise you, or you know, you've got the DFE. You've got all these different people putting different pressures on you. And in the middle of that, sometimes it can be easy to forget what it's all about. And I think sometimes you just have to keep coming back to, we're here for the children. And I do think that if you put every decision that you make through the lens of how does this benefit the children, that's probably the best thing you can do to get, you know, to really ground you in what you're trying to achieve. Because actually, if you're not thinking through it, you know, how's this going to benefit the children? If the answer is it's not, my question would be, why the heck are you doing it? You know?
Yeah, I'd agree.
Yeah.
So the other thing that I wanted to talk to you about is that quite often, I mean, I've been to a couple of conferences where I've spoken about inquiry driven learning, where I've talked about when I've spoken about play and that dirty word in education, fun. And I've been not quite ridiculed, but I've been sort of challenged by people who believe that playful inquiry is undisciplined, that it's that learning through play isn't structured enough. And I mean, I'm going to go round you in turn on this one, because I'm sure you've all got something to say about it. But I mean, Claire, what would you say about that as a comment?
Yeah, I mean, the word play, it's always up for debate, isn't it? It's a kind of an elusive concept, and I'm more conscious about you shouldn't be conscious about or worrying about using the word play, because that is what children do. That is what they are biologically motivated to do. And certainly in the age group that I work with, that's my philosophy. It's thankfully the philosophy of my leadership team. We use planning in the moment. So we're following children's interests when they're highly motivated, and like both Katie and Ruth and yourself have said, you know, you're looking for those teachable moments. What resource can I introduce? What language? What concepts? And it doesn't have to be, oh wow, now they've learned this great big new skill, but it's those tiny little steps towards something, and it's something that you're doing together. It's a partnership. It's amazing. It changed when we introduced planning in the moment. It absolutely changed my approach to teaching.
So when you say planning in the moment, is that like a responsive classroom effectively, that you're just
across the year you'll have kind of, well, you know, it's Easter, or you know it's springtime, so you might be planting. So there are natural points across the year that you'll think about resourcing, or across the year you might make your resources more complex, and more skills are introduced for the children as the year goes through. But yeah, you're responding to children in the moment. They might have a question, they might be exploring something, and you know, what is your role as the adult to give a nudge, as Katie was saying, just to lead them on to the next step. It's a shared moment.
Lovely. I love that. I mean, I used to have a what do you want to know board in my secondary classroom, because so often kids would ask the most incredible questions, you know, the most amazing things, and I'd be looking at the syllabus and going, God, we've got to move on. And so in the end, I just got so frustrated with it that I gave up 10 minutes of time at the end of every lesson. They could just get up in the middle of the lesson and write their question on the what do you want to know board.
Yeah.
And at the end of the lesson, I'd just we'd go through all the comments and the questions they had, because I hated shutting them down. I absolutely hated it.
Yeah, even, sorry.
No, carry on.
No, I was just going to say, that picking up on those moments to teach, like even when I do the register in the morning and the families are arriving, and I'll normally have a small group of children around me that just want to be by me until, until they're settled, and they'll be commenting, there'll be, so there's opportunities for number, you count how many children are in today, Claire. Oh, what's a vegetarian? One child asked me when I was counting up who's staying for lunch. Oh, and think about allergies. What's an allergy? Who's got an allergy? What happens? So there's all these things that you could never you wouldn't necessarily plan for, but they're these fascinating conversations that you have with children, and that they know when that moment is happening, don't you? You get that feeling that this is
absolutely.
I think
So
it's
that's
sorry, Kate, I was just going to say, I think it's capitalizing on that natural curiosity that, it is an innate thing. We are naturally curious as humans, so why don't we capitalize on that? Children, as Claire rightly said, children bring so much to school, no matter what their previous experience. Nobody comes to school with no experience at all. Some of it is very, very positive, and some children have had less positive experiences, but they will bring things with them, and you can build on that.
Yes, and they bring enthusiasms. Even the most, I can say this with absolute, confidence, in 15 years, even the most switched off of kids has had something that they're enthusiastic about. I mean, at one point I had a kid whose enthusiasm was rifles. But I still managed to get him quite interested. We found a book which was American Kids, it was called, and it was about gun crime. It was a fiction book, but he loved it, and he absolutely ate that book up. But it was only because I managed to hear him talking about it to someone, and it was just that moment of, oh my God, he does actually have something that he really loves, and picking up on it and running with it. So Ruth, what would you say to anyone who says that play isn't structured enough?
I think there's a huge conversation to be had about the word play, because I think when I talk about play and playfulness, I may be looking at it through a very different lens to somebody who maybe works with older children or maybe works with adults who's thinking about play. And we often hear the word just put in front of play. You just play, and actually there are so many different types of play. I mean, there's a taxonomy of play that's been identified by play workers, 16 different types of play. And so I think we have to have that conversation to make sure we've got a shared understanding of what we mean. And each one of those types of play, so the completely wild, unstructured play that you would see, that I sort of think about when I was a child, and I'm sort of recollecting. I grew up in a mining community, and we used to take bits of corrugated roof and use them as sledges down the slag heap, which is probably a miracle that I'm still with you. But that completely wild, unstructured, off you go for the day, and do what you're going to do kind of play, that has a place, but that's not what we're talking about in the classroom, and that's not what we mean.
And also, but I think I've read something really interesting that kind of links to that the other day. In that, where to the untrained eye, if someone to walk into an early year setting and wow, what do they do? They're just running around. What are they doing? Well, actually, they're learning to be social beings. That's part of being 3. That's part of being part of 2. We have 2-year-olds in my setting. They're learning to be people, and you have to take your time to kind of understand what they're doing. But actually, just fundamentally, they're learning to be human beings and be sociable with other children. So that in itself has value, doesn't it? For very, very small children.
So each one of those different types of play has value, but I do think the play that we're talking about
in the classroom,
certainly in the classroom in primary school, is a different type of play to the play that you would see on the playground. And I think we get this a lot with the outdoors. It's one of my bugbears. They're just whizzing around on bikes, or why do they need to go on a climbing frame? And there are so many different reasons why those things are just as important as handwriting, counting, reading.
Absolutely,
they're all linked. But because that looks different to what we see further up the school, it doesn't feel like it's it's the same. It doesn't feel like it's academic learning, and that becomes problematic for some people.
Yes.
Yeah.
Again, we're at that measuring thing again, aren't we? That if you can't measure it, it's not real. This idea that like some people have, that if you can't tangibly quantify it, then it's not happening.
Yeah.
So, Katie, you're probably going to be the one that gives I think probably one of the most impassioned answers about this. Because I know I've talked to you about it before. A lot of people quite often say, oh, well, you know, inquiry driven and playful learning is just messing around. I mean, where's the learning? Where's the focus? And what would you say?
Well, I mean, first of all, I was going to say that those are the two words I would link together, play and inquiry, and playful inquiry. If you use the term playful inquiry, it kind of gives a slightly different picture of what might be happening. And if you think about, you know, things like the design thinking cycle, all of those ideas of, you know, innovators nowadays, you know, they're looking at playing with ideas. Play isn't something that is relegated to our early years. It's something that is a valuable 21st century skill that we really need to be embracing. And there are definitely ways that we can do that. And, you know, by using structures like the inquiry cycle, design thinking cycles, things that give it, you know, give it that edge, that where you're really looking for what happens next. So
Yeah.
that observation and that nudging and that this is where we're going to go next. It can be a very, very powerful tool.
I mean, one thing I would say is that I attempted to put an awful lot of playful inquiry into my secondary teaching. And I was accused on several occasions. There was a big craze for gamification in the classroom. And to be fair, I embraced it. I went with it. But a lot of people said, oh, you know, it's just games for game's sake. It's just playing for play's sake. And first of all, playing for play's sake, like Ruth has said, has its purpose. And, you know, I can tell you right now that I had 15, 16-year-olds loving coming to school. And if that's not a purpose, I don't know what is, because, you know, we all know that one of the hardest things in terms of teaching kids is getting them engaged in the first place. You know, that's one of the biggest challenges. The other thing, though, was that I think it is about making sure that it's purposeful, you know, that we are looking, like Ruth said, why are you doing it? Are you doing it because it's a gimmick, or are you doing it because actually you know it will hook that child, you know it will give an opportunity for them to explore something in a different way? And for me, I think that's the takeaway that needs to be passed up to secondary school, is that it isn't just throwing games into a normal lesson plan. It's not about chunking your lesson into, well, now we're going to do serious work and then we'll do some games. You know, playful inquiry is the nature in which you inquire. It's not about playing games all the way through a lesson. And I think
I was just going to say, I think there's a lot of knowledge and skill required to do inquiry well as well. You know, there seems to be this notion that the children discover things for themselves, and the adult,
there's no knowledge.
we just sort of drift around, and you know, and nothing could be further from the truth. Everything that you do is really carefully thought through. It's planned. You've got a really clear intention. You know, certainly in an early years classroom, every single piece of furniture, every resource, you've thought about what the children are likely to do with that and what learning they'll get from it. And if it's not got a place, you know, if it's not earning its place, you get it out, you know. So
absolutely,
it's
yeah,
really carefully planned and thought through.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So here's my thing: when should we stop playing?
Never. We're all playing now, aren't we? You look at what
Yeah.
we're doing in lockdown. We're all entertaining ourselves, you know.
Oh, look, see, I'm getting the notes on the screen from people watching, and I've just had 100 people go, never,
Absolutely
don't
never.
ever stop.
Yeah.
I just think that's one of the things that I found really joyful. We've been sort of preparing the VE Day stuff here in my village, and the kids have been out chalking out hopscotch and marbles circles and things on the road, and they're really excited. I sent some things over, some resources around the village for people to learn games, you know, the Second World War games, and they've got some rope games that they're going to do so they can still stand sort of 3 meters apart and skip on a rope, and they were really excited. to be doing it. They were really excited to find out more. Not just the kids. My next door neighbour came out. She went, God, I didn't take history at school. It was boring. She said, but actually, it's not boring, is it? It's really exciting.
Right, 8 o'clock.
Oh,
It's clap for the NHS, everybody. Clap. Woo! And also, once you've clapped, write to your MPs to make sure they get their pay rise.
Sorry.
yeah, all my neighbours are out in the street now. I shall be getting looks because I'm not there.
You're a pariah. Actually, it's not bad timing, ladies, because we are, would you believe it, already at 8 o'clock.
Yeah.
So
Darn.
I'm going to see if Damien's around. I think he probably is. Damien? You around?
I'm here. I'm just waiting for my video to start. Bear with me a second.
Can I just say,
Loving the NHS back there.
Someone's just parked across someone's drive. That's what's the problem.
Who is it? Who is it that's beeping? Oh, there we go. It's gone.
Let's just play the game.
Can I just say, ladies, it's been so lovely talking to you. I've been grinning the whole way through, not least because of the noises, but genuinely, it's been really, really uplifting to talk to people who are so passionate about kids. It's been really lovely. Thank you.
Thank you for inviting me. Thank you.
Before we end, I've got some questions for you all. If you could all stay there. I think Mary's made a good point on there. Then, you know, everyone's clapping outside. People are playing. They're engaging. It's opportunity for creativity. It's really, really good. So I'm going to just scroll up. I'm going to just find some questions for you. Bear with me a second.
Okay.
So here's one from our community that came in via Facebook. What are your thoughts on the huge amount of free resources currently being released by companies during this crisis? Confusing, helpful, or opportunism? Probably a bit of all three.
Yeah.
Well, can I speak as somebody who made some free resources myself?
Yeah, me
Go
too.
for it.
The reason that I got involved in that was because I was very worried about the appropriateness of some of the resources that were out there for very, very young children. There were lots of working at tables, worksheet type things, and I was getting a lot of feedback that people were stressed about that. And I think some people are doing it through pure altruism, and that was definitely where the colleagues that I worked with were coming from. There was absolutely no money to be made, and it was hard work. But I do think it's overwhelming for some people.
Yeah, that's the word.
And actually, if it's got a logo on it, if it looks official, if it says it's for reception or if it says it's for nursery, then parents might trust that, and it might not be entirely appropriate. So I think there's definitely a space for somebody to filter things and say, yes, you know, some quality assurance would be good. I think most people are coming from a good place, I would say.
I would say in most cases, check in with your school. I mean, there are very few teachers, and I say this probably naively, but hopefully, there are very few teachers who don't genuinely care about what's happening to their students right now. So, I mean, if you're in any way unsure, check in with someone at the school and they'll probably give you a hand with that. I mean, what I would say is that some of the resources that I've seen might be appropriate after. In a way, they're not necessarily appropriate right now. I would honestly say, and I say this to all parents and all teachers and everyone who is dealing with this right now, your instinct is your friend.
When
your
we've
your friend.
when we've put together,
you're doing right.
I think that the thing really is there is a wealth, you know, there's a flurry of activities and things to help parents that have come online in the last couple of weeks. And I think this is the point at which, you know, we just need to take that sort of inquiry stance into ourselves and get to know our own children and know what's right for us, and then sort of delve into that and reach out to other people. There's certainly a lot of things there, but it's about what's right for you. And if playing in the garden all day is what's right for you right now, then that's the thing to be doing. I think that's what we really need to be. So that's a very self-reflective stance.
Yeah, I mean, that's where we were coming from with what we did, which is very much activities that you can do at home with things like cardboard boxes.
Yeah, what you've got already at your fingertips.
Yeah, absolutely. Making sock puppets, you know, pairing up the washing,
Yeah.
Really empowering people to understand that every single thing you do with your child is a
Yeah.
learning experience.
Yes.
Yeah, I managed to do 1 week's worth of home learning. We cover the 7 areas, and I think about 4 of them were about dandelions. You know, you go for a walk in the park, there's loads of dandelions. There was a poem, there was making a sensory bottle, looking at the life cycle of the dandelion, and it's just stuff that you can do without needing lots of other things.
We're very lucky. We live in North Wales, and we live in the countryside, and we've been doing lots of mini beast hunts, and we've been doing lots of walks. And I've got a 3-year-old and a 6-year-old, so obviously they're very different levels of their learning journey. Naomi's very sharp anyway, so she runs through stuff like she gets the resources from school and they're gone within a day. So we've been trying to do things, doing maths by playing things like 21 with a pack of cards. Who absolutely loves that.
Yeah,
we're lucky we got a garden and things, so it's just bringing everything together. And we've been very lucky with the weather as well. I think if it had been raining, it would have been awful.
I think it is taking a lead from your kids as well in a way. One of the things that I think is quite interesting is that I'm going to praise my sister-in-law here, but my nieces and my niece and nephew from my other brother, very rarely do I hear the words "I'm bored," because both sets of parents have been very much putting the onus on them to be self-resilient and self-resourceful in that respect. You know, actually, if you're bored, what can you do? Like, where can you go? What can you do? What can you find? What can you see? What can you make? And I think that, you know, let your kids take the lead a bit, you know, because then it's their choice more than anything as well.
Definitely. I think you're right with using your intuition as well. You know, if it's opportunism or it's helpful. You know, for example, there's lots of great resources out there. I'm a school governor as well at our primary school. And I know at this point, we're probably not going to take a free trial of a VLE or a massive learning platform that involves a massive shift of resources over. It's not going to happen, as well-intentioned as that is, and it is well-intentioned. So yeah, I think you're right there. I've got another question for you. So a question for Claire. You mentioned about the importance of developing a relationship with parents. How do you suggest we can help to build parental engagement?
I mean, things are probably going to be very different going forward after this pandemic. I mean, we always do home visits. Home visits are so important. We see children at home in their surroundings with their family members. We have a well-being form where there's lots of questions that we read through, so we get a sense, you know, what was the child premature when they were born? That could have a huge impact on their learning and development. Getting to know what children enjoy doing before they come at nursery, so we think about what resources we have, what conversations we can have that will help us connect. It's very much about building relationships through children's interests and making them feel comfortable when they come to us, because they're 2 and they're 3, and it can't be an alien environment. So I think getting to know the family and working with the family is so important. And the learning journey, I know Katie spoke about the learning journey, the documentation, sharing that. We have learning journeys that go home with the children. It's got pictures and the observations, so families can see what the children are doing at home, at nursery rather, and it's a 2-way process. They can also contribute to it and tell us what they're doing at home, celebrations, family members, new pet, someone's staying dry overnight. That's really important as well. You know, they're out of nappies. That's fantastic. So getting to know the families is really, really key.
I would say from an older perspective as well, I was a mentor rather than a homeroom or a tutor. I was a mentor, and that involved working closely with a group of 13 children. So not the massive group of 30, but instead I was still a homeroom tutor. So I still had like a tutor group as well. But having 13 kids who I personally knew, and I didn't just know them as a subject teacher, and I didn't just know them as a class teacher. I knew them. I knew their birthday. I knew their favorite color. I knew the band they liked. I knew if they were having troubles with boys, you know, I knew. And it meant that I could be that point of contact for home. And it also meant that I knew that kid well enough to flag issues really quickly. It's a difficult move from the kind of group pastoral that we have now, where we have, you know, 1 or 2 pastoral people in charge of lots and lots of kids, but we have enough staff in schools to manage it. It just means that every teacher has to take a pastoral responsibility, which really they should be doing anyway.
And that's the beauty of the key person, isn't it? If
you value it, you'll do it, won't you?
Exactly. And the teachers who say that they're not touchy-feely and don't want to do it, well, you're a teacher. You know, actually, pastoral is just as much part of your responsibility as academic.
Well said. Well said. I think I've got Rhiannon on, who you all know runs our community. I think I'm going to hand the headset over to her. I think she wants to just say something really quickly, and then we'll get on to another question.
Okay.
I won't keep you too long, don't worry. Swapping seats. There we go.
I know. I'm sorry. I just like something Kate said before. I don't want to sound big-headed, but I think like the assumption that when kids go to school, that's it's time to hand over to school, and that's when you stop playing. I think like the parents who are playing now, are they the only parents that are playing now? Do you know what I mean? How do you engage with people that perhaps weren't beforehand? I don't know.
Can I just pick something up there? Because I was sort of thinking about, we have to get under the skin of why people stop. And I wonder if people stop for fear of doing things wrong. I used to get that quite a lot as a nursery and reception teacher. I didn't do it because I didn't want to do it wrong.
Yeah.
And actually, I think we need to empower people and say, no, whatever you're doing with your children, the fact that you're spending time with them is doing it right.
Yeah.
You know, that is good, and it's good, and please do that.
Yeah.
But
Best thing you can do, spend time with them.
And I think that comes back to what Claire talked about before, about that communication and that understanding, and what Katie talked about earlier about what's the purpose of that documentation, and the purpose of it is to communicate and understand each other.
Yeah, it won't work otherwise, will it? It's the team around the child, it's the whole child, the family, it's the community, it's communities within communities, and it's not, we don't work in isolation, do we?
No.
I think honestly the answer to your question, Rhiannon, though, is that we don't know what happens behind closed doors as much as we should. I think Claire, you know, has given us a lead in that we should probably be building that rapport and maintaining it all the way through. And so that's one thing we can do. But I think the other thing that we can do is model. And that's something that we forget, is that we don't just teach kids. We teach parents as well. You know, we teach entire families and communities. And we've shown that in the way that we've responded to the pandemic. The education system has been more than just a child factory. You know, it's been something that has been at the heart of communities. And so I think we've just got to keep modeling and then helping wherever we can to support people trying to do it at home.
I think learning from families as well, you know, at the end of the day, the parents know their children really, really well.
Exactly.
We have
two-way.
to listen and learn. It's got to be a two-way street.
Yeah. And building the confidence with them, and you know, family learning. We invite we invite families to come in and play, read a story, and people feel a bit anxious, but just making people feel welcome and that they can do these things. Yeah, and reassuring parents at home that they're doing, like you said, they're doing fine. I've had parents say to me, "Oh, I'm trying to get them to write their letters." I'm like, "Yeah, but they don't want to do it." I say, "Look, keep reading, keep talking, keep playing. Don't worry about that. You're doing a great job."
Yeah, it's very much about empowering parents.
Yeah.
I'd agree.
Yeah, I think like Naomi's teachers sending some really cute messages, like just random stuff that we send, like a silly picture of like us out and about, but just the comments are so encouraging. It's like, you keep it up. It's like, no.
Yeah.
My amazing goodness.
Yeah, we've our Twitter community's really grown. I think it's one thing professionals saying, "Oh, well done," liking a tweet, patting you on the back. That's lovely from your colleagues. But we've now got families joining us on Twitter, and parents. I will upload photos of the children's, or they baked, or a drawing, or they've just learned to ride a bike, and parents liking each other's tweets. And for me, you know, it's just holding on to that little bit of community that. Don't want to lose it. So seeing that just it makes me so happy.
Yeah, I think it's also about getting rid of, again, we're back to the whole measuring and testing and quantifying, but it's, to a large extent, it's getting rid of this idea that it is a competition. Learning isn't a competition. There isn't a winner or a loser. Everybody learns a different pace, everybody learns in their own way, and everybody has a different route that they're going to take eventually with their learning. And you can't say from that who is more successful than someone else, because everybody has a different measure of success. And so actually we need to stop this idea of, well, I'm doing it wrong because my kid can't do X, Y, Z, or, you know, I'm not going to let my child do this because they need to do X, Y, and Z. And actually, I think we kind of just get to the point where we need to just let go a little bit and stop being quite so controlling, I think, maybe. And I think that goes for everybody, parents, teachers. I think perhaps we just need to let kids learn.
Yeah, I think parents are influenced by, you know, the question of when are they going to sit down and write their ABCs, and they're 3, and you have to have a very gentle conversation, and it happens over time about, actually, you know, we're going to do lots of talking, we're going to do lots of moving about, and kind of shifting supporting parents to, you know, also understand what can be learned through play. It's
changing expectations. Yeah.
Great stuff. Damien's back, by the way. Rhiannon's, my daughter is reading a bedtime story to the dog at the moment, so she's got to deal with that for a second. A couple more, I'll throw them at you. So somebody on YouTube has put, great discussion, Ruth. The child-centered approach isn't there across all of education, unfortunately. A lot can be learned from EYS. I'm sure that's something you'll probably agree with.
Completely agree. Yeah, I think we can all learn a lot from each other, though. I think, you know, one of the things that I am constantly banging on about, if you've ever seen me on Twitter, is respect for EYFS, but also respect across sectors. You know, we can learn a lot. We need to know where children are heading to. We can't work in silos.
Right.
We have to work with these children over time. So yeah, absolutely. Let's you know, learn from each other, and let's build on the foundations that we build.
Stronger together.
Absolutely.
Completely agree. So Mike is actually, so a bit of from Nexus here. Mike's put, a lot can be taken from play as a biological imperative for children. Play is as important for adults. I know certainly now play is helping my mental health during lockdown, as it is for me as well. It's a shame that this is having to remind us it's important to look after ourselves and keep ourselves intrigued. Something I know you're a big advocate, Cate, with being kind to yourself.
Yeah.
You've got a conference coming up next year, haven't you, Cate? All centered around kindness.
Keeping It Kind 2021. Thank you for the plug. Yeah, I genuinely believe, I mean, I've always said this, that be kind, be genuine, and be a little bit silly. I think, you know, silliness is one of the most wonderful, joyful things in the world. And I am determined. My mum, Katie knows this, my mum is one of the most intelligent ladies I know, but she's also incredibly immature at times, quite deliberately so. You know, she'll crouch down next to toddlers and have conversations with them, and she'll kick footballs around with boys in the park, and she's in her late 70s, and she still plays, you know. And that's been a great advocate for me. And her mum was the same. You know, she still played, she was still joyfully playful. And you know, I'm determined that I will be the same, because I think it reminds us of who we were, and that gives us a level of empathy with the people we teach. You know, we can't lose sight of the kids that we are still. You know, we're still the same person. They're not a different species. Children are just small humans. You know, they're not aliens.
Human beings, not human becomings.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And you know, people always say, oh, you know, what are you going to do when you grow up? Well, no, what are you doing right now? That's what's important. Who are you right now? Because why are we always pushing forward to something else? You know, what kids are doing right now is important, and what we're doing right now is important. Stop, smell the roses, have some fun.
The problem is as parents ourselves, we try to instill, you know, character traits or the best traits we can in our children, and one of those is not, you don't live up to everybody else's expectations or even ours. You are what you are, and we're really, really blessed that they're both really well behaved. But it's not like that out there, is it? That's the problem. It needs a societal change and to come round to the way of thinking that we need to encourage people's individual strength. It's not all about it's not even about academic achievement. I mean, I didn't go to university. I did well at A-level, didn't go to university, so I didn't want to. I wanted to go and earn some money rather than get into debt. But even that now is frowned upon. People say, "Oh, you run a business, but you didn't go to university." Well, yeah, I've got other skills that I've learned in that time. It's the same with children as well. Everybody learns in different ways, and that's the biggest thing we're trying to pass on.
Yeah,
exactly.
Back to the unique child.
Yeah, that's what's so central to the early EYFS, isn't it? The unique child and how we interact with that child. It's and that takes skill, like everyone's been saying. It's
a great benefit, I think, of. Sorry, Ruth.
I was just going to say, I do wonder if after this crisis, where we've all had to think very differently about the way we live, and we've all had to change our lifestyles, you know, hopefully we'll hold on to some of the positive things that have come about, some of the playfulness, some of the sharing, the communication. I've seen some amazing creativity, you know, things people are doing and putting out there on social media, and we think, wow, you know, this is brilliant. Why would you stop doing that? You know?
No, exactly. It's amazing.
Sorry.
I mean, one thing I would say, I've often thought this, and I hate sounding like I'm criticizing, because I'm not. I genuinely think that the UK education system is marvelous for so many reasons. I mean, we're immensely lucky to have a system that runs like ours. You know, we're still at the core, we're still a public service, and that is fabulous. One thing I would say that has to change, I think, is that children don't fail, we fail them. And we do that by we put them in a system that fails them. And we have to get our heads around that. It isn't the kids failing, it's the system failing the kids, that actually we're putting them through a system that doesn't fit them. And actually now I would say there's a huge proportion that it doesn't fit, because we're learning more and more how diverse learners are. And that perhaps is something that we have to take forward from this, is that I don't think we can stick to a one size fits all formulaic way of learning. I don't think that will work again.
No, I completely agree. And as parents, and I can speak as parents, it's been great to actually show my children, as somebody working from home, what I do and give them the skills of actually, this is what work is, this is what daddy does, this is why I do it, and really link it all back round to, I mean, Naomi's here now, she's only 6. Do you like what daddy does? She said yes, that's good. She said no, I've been worrying. She just found out she's on YouTube. It's not YouTube Kids though, so it's not that exciting, don't worry. But it's been great to spend that time as a parent, and I think that's something that I don't want to give up anytime soon. Last question, I think, and it's something that's very topical at the moment. I don't think we'll be sending Naomi back to school before September, regardless of what the government say, as a personal choice for us. There's obviously breaking news today. BESA released a policy update today, which we shared, which was sort of the inner workings of a cabinet office meeting today, where they were talking about doing a staggered return to school starting on June the 1st. And they're talking about year 6, year 10, 11 and 12, I think. Don't quote me on that. I think they're the year groups they're looking at first. Obviously, don't answer if you don't want to. What are your personal thoughts, as to wrap up, keep it topical, what are your personal thoughts on where we're at the moment? If that is true, what are your thoughts?
One of the things that I've been thinking about the going back to school and the 2-meter distancing and what that might look like in a classroom. I'm really wondering how that fits with kind of pedagogy that we're talking about here, this sort of playfulness. I can't, you know, I've seen the pictures coming out of Denmark with children sitting at their desks for the day. And that really concerns me. So that's something that I'm really interested in finding out how that might look in the classroom.
There's a really interesting article from Family yesterday, which is it's the early years sector talking about how they've implemented social distancing in as much as they possibly can in the nursery settings. And you know what they've found is it's almost impossible to do that. So what they've done is they've gone for something which is very much like our key worker system, but those groups of children stay with that worker and work in almost familial groups, and that seems to be working really well. So they have a rota system, they come in on different days, and it's set up and it's organised. It's all organised around socialisation. because you know everything we've talked about in this discussion has been about that learning from each other, that socialization, and how important that is. So I think we can learn a lot from the Danish early years sector about what they've done, but I don't think it's without its issues. My personal feeling is that I want to know that people, I want some very clear guidance from the government. I don't want heads on early years sector to be put in a position where they have to make difficult decisions without clear guidance. And I really feel that whatever happens, it should happen over a long period of time so that people have time to plan it. They can make it work in their unique setting. So they've got clear guidance, but it works for their community, for their school, based on their community needs, their children's needs and their staff needs, rather than always thinking about, right, we're doing this because we've got to get back to work. So I think it's complex.
Yeah, I agree with what everyone said, and I read that article as well, Ruth. It was, and that those little social bubbles of small groups of children, that I do worry that we're not quite seeing the level of health across the country to be at the position really for schools to return. But that's just my
I agree. We're in North Wales, and they're saying we're 12 weeks behind London now. I'd like to know what the government are going off. Are they going off the London stats? Are they going off nationwide stats? If it's nationwide, as someone in North Wales, we're 12 weeks behind, so we're nowhere near the peak. I mean, we've had 60 cases within our community that's known of. So that's the worrying thing for us. And just to clarify as well, Mike's very right to point it out. I think I got it wrong there. So they're on about 20% of school capacity, and it being year 6, 11, and 12. It may open up to year 5, depending on what's happening. I say that's what was reported by Beezer today. So I did want to touch on it because it's been quite high in the news, as we can all say. Toria Claire, she says, I hate speculation, and we agree with you, but it is news and we have to talk about it. And the only way we will get the government to listen to our opinions is by discussing it in forums like this and getting it out there.
Can I just quickly say, the one thing that I think is really important with the whole lockdown thing is, first of all, the maths is ultimately the minute we come out of lockdown, the likelihood is there will probably be a second wave. The other thing that we have to bear in mind is, Monday, the newspapers in this country put out about a relaxation on social distancing and on isolation, and already there are people congregating in parks. There are people going out in their hundreds to Tesco's, and these are adults who are fully aware of the ramifications. They're people who know, and what we're doing by opening schools again is we're asking children to be able to have more restraint than adults. And actually, believe it or not, I actually think they are more capable in some capacity, but I do think it's very hard, I think, to put kids back into the environment that they've been in with their friends and their peers, and then expect them to function in a completely different way. And we've already asked them to do that once. And I just think, as Ruth said, and Claire says, and Kate says, whatever happens next has to be done for the right reasons. It has to be done for the best reasons for the children, the best reasons for those learners. And at the moment, I don't think, in the case of the majority of children, I don't think it is the best.
I was in nursery yesterday. Sorry, Kate, I was in nursery yesterday, and I saw a child that I hadn't seen since back when, and the first thing she did was run up to me for a hug. And that's what children do when they see people that mean something to them. And what do you do? What's the appropriate response in that situation? You probably return it. It's really hard.
It's difficult, isn't it? It's a human instinct, isn't it? My little boy is 3. He's in preschool, going to September. He's got a heart defect. There's absolutely no way we'll be sending him into school until we are 100% sure. And Gemma Hill Davis, just put in the comments there, the thought of my 5-year-old year 1 child sat at a single desk on their own doing worksheets and not be able to work in groups or hold hands is upsetting. Rather keep us safe and happy at home at the moment. And again, it wraps around what you've been saying about learning from home and bringing the outside in, and playful learning. I think that
I would hope that the government would put provision there that actually, if that's what parents feel, that they won't be punished for that. That
God,
you know,
yeah.
it will be a parental choice. I think we need to really look at what we do in terms of attendance, because we can't insist that parents send children into school if they are not 100% happy with it. I don't think that's the right thing to do. So,
Welsh Government have been quite strong on this, actually, and they've said today that schools will not be returning in Wales on June the 1st. And they've also said that there will be no fines for parents even when schools return if they decide to keep their children home, which I think is the most sensible advice that I've heard from any government at the moment. And I might be a bit biased because I'm Welsh, but there we go. I'll go with that.
I think it's also worth, oh, sorry, you go. You
I was
go.
going to say I may move to Wales.
Yeah.
You're more than welcome.
It's also worth noting that there are an awful lot of vulnerable teachers. You know, that in the 3 weeks before lockdown, I mean, I was doing supply at the time and I worked full time because I was covering teachers who had already isolated. That if schools do go back with any capacity, they have to acknowledge, I mean, this is the other thing, and this is where people might say that I'm being selfish, and you know what, I actually am. I am going to be selfish right now. My mum is high risk. My mum is on the high risk register. She has chronic obstructive pulmonary disorder, and I'm not entirely sure that I would want to put myself in a position where I yet again become contagious, because that means that again I'm not able to see my parents. And so, you know, this isn't just children, this is other people's families as well. You know, teachers have families, teachers have loved ones, and in the same way the NHS workers do, yes, we have a job to do, but it's about necessary risks, isn't it? It's about necessary risks. And you know, that's where I think, you know, we have to make decisions based on what is a necessary risk. And I think that this, you know, this isn't that, you know, there's nothing dreadful happening right now in terms of homeschooling. And this idea that Michael Wilshaw that was saying, you know, that we're going to have to repeat a year, it's just nonsense. It's absolute nonsense.
And they've only missed 18 days, haven't they, so far?
Yeah.
If you take the break into account.
And everybody's missed the same, so it's this notion of falling behind. Who are these children?
Falling behind what, though? Falling behind what? Falling behind an imaginary standard.
Yeah, exactly. So it's an arbitrary measure that, and again, I think that just comes back to we are quite fixated on where we expect children to be at certain points in time, and we need to let go of that.
Yeah, I completely agree. I want to try and wrap up now in the next couple of minutes. I'm conscious that everybody is keen to get onto their glass of wine or on their TV or whatever they want to do. Can I just ask each of you and the panel to go through one by one, just explain a bit about where people can find you, where they can connect with you, what you do, and then obviously give your Twitter handles and stuff so we can all find you. Start with Claire.
Okay, my Twitter handle, I think, is Claire at EYFS, Claire?
No, Claire
underscore.
Oh, thank you. That's the other Claire EYFS. There's two of us. Claire underscore. What is it, please, Damien?
EYFS.
That's the one. Yeah. Was there anything else?
No, go for it. Ruth, do you want to go into yours?
Yeah, I'm a school improvement advisor and early years consultant, and I work all over the country. And you'll find me a lot on Twitter, especially at the moment because I'm not working. At Swales Ruth, so just my name. And I've just put my website. It's Assure Education. I put it in the chat. Come and say hello.
Fantastic, Katie.
Yeah, I'm currently working as an education consultant. I also work for the IB running workshops. So I'm based here in the UK, but I go overseas as well when I can. You can find me on Twitter, at Mrs. Cate Knight.
Fantastic.
Okay.
And finally, the amazing Cate Knight, who's been our interviewer for the last few weeks and the next couple of weeks as well and beyond, hopefully. Do you want to give a little bit about yourself? Talk about your conference. Well, I tried to plug it before for you. You gave one sentence. Come on.
Okay, so I'm known for kindness. I'm running a kindness conference next year called Keeping It Kind 2021. Keep an eye out on Twitter for that. Myself and Helen Delamy are doing that. And I am Missy Musician 81. And if you want kindness, silliness, and general light-hearted ranting, that's where you can find me.
Fantastic. Thank you to everybody. I really, really appreciate your time. I'm sure we'll we'll get lots of engagement on this, and I'll be pushing questions towards you through private messaging, and we'll probably do a follow-up in a month or so and see where everybody's at. Who knows what we'll all be doing by then. Thank you everybody for watching. I do encourage you to go over to www.nexus-education.com, have a look through all the resources, go onto the website, have a look on there. Ruth, Katie, Claire, Kate, thank you very much, and thank you everybody for watching. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Goodbye, everybody.
Thank you for the challenges. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.